All right, welcome back to another episode of At Home with Founders. Today's guest is someone who embodies what it means to build with depth, clarity, and care. So Meg Gold is the co-founder and CEO of BONDE, a private vetted professionals community designed to help women decision makers connect, grow, and navigate that often unseen parts of leadership and career. So BONDE was created out of Meg's personal recognition that what many women need most isn't just another networking group, it's a space built on real connection, mutual support, and meaningful exchange. So in this conversation, we're going to go beyond the surface to explore what led Meg to build BONDE in the first place, the high impact lessons that she's learned along the way, because I'm sure there's lots, so we all have them, and the moments that stretched her the most. Also, how she's holding intention and growth at the exact same time. So whether you're contemplating your next big move, looking for depth in your business life, or curious about what it really takes to build something out of substance, this episode brings honest insight and heartful reflection. So grab your coffee or tea and let's get into it. So welcome, Meg. I'm truly honored to have you here today. I've admired from a distance what you've built with BONDE and how you built it with heart and conviction. So before we dive into your story as a founder, I'd love to start somewhere more personal so that those tuning in can get to know you on a human level before we dive all into the business.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for having me, Jessica. It's been a goal of mine to join a few podcasts this year. And so I was so honored when you reached out and said, hey, how about mine? So I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. And honestly, even just putting myself out there and starting to tackle a goal and say yes to something. I think you are experiencing it as well, even just with relaunching your podcast or rebranding and leaning back in. So it's great. I think we're both kind of doing something new together today, which is the perfect BONDE way in that manner. So thank you for having me and betting on me in this way. But a little about me. I am a wife, a mom of two. I have two little boys, 3 and 1. Both of them came by way of IVF. My husband and I really struggled getting pregnant for a while when we were in San Francisco and working and doing all that. And we can get into that a lot of those details later. And we finally, after many rounds of infertility or many rounds of IVF, were able to get pregnant. So we now have two beautiful little baby boys, and it's been wonderful. And so I have had a long career in people leadership, in revenue roles, and transitioned out of corporate once I had my son and just had that aha moment, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point too. But transitioned and then eventually started BONDE. And now I'm one of the co-founders of BONDE, which is a private community for professional women, all geared towards past history and some of those linear things that, start from the beginning and get to where we are now. So that's a little about me.
I love that. IVF, I've seen so many share their stories going through that. It is such a deeply personal and very vulnerable and challenging at times journey. And, I'm just so happy that you ended up with two young little babies. I'm so happy for you.
It's one of the most isolating and lonely times, I think, for so many people, because starting a family is such an it's one of the most, if not the most intimate experiences of your entire life. And for people that it happens naturally for. And so when you're going through a medical procedure and process to start a family, it starts to become a little bit more public or a little bit more process oriented. And it's hard to navigate. How do I draw the line between being out there with this very intimate in the bedroom experience but also, keep it quiet and keep it for myself. So it's a very unique, isolating, and also vulnerable time, because you also don't know the end goal until you get to the ultimately the end goal and the decision, whether you can get pregnant or not. So it's wild, Jessica, the difference between 5 years ago when I was going through it, when I first started it, until now, just how many more people are starting to get more comfortable talking about it, myself included, as an advocate of saying, I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off in my intro early and often and make sure people know I'm not just a mom of two, but by way of IVF, just to make sure that people know that there's somebody like myself to be able to talk to in that manner, because it's something that it's a journey for sure.
Yeah. And there's so many that go through it. So, having people that have gone through it as well can be really, really good during that really difficult time for some. So I think it's really important that we do talk about those types of things for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So let's talk about before bond. what
Sure.
what exactly happened there? So was there a moment professionally, or whether that's deeply personal, that shifted something in you, something that made you realize that you just couldn't keep leading from somebody else's vision of what they wanted, and you had to actually build something for yourself?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think growing up, I was always I was always a rule breaker. I was always somebody that I was my parents finally said I was the most challenging child for them to raise out of the three of us. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that I was just naturally a bit of a rule breaker, naturally a little bit of a boundary pusher. And I think it's because I saw potential in so many things. And I think I saw alternative ways of doing things, more efficient ways of doing things. And that can be really annoying to people sometimes. And so I was never the person growing up that knew what I wanted to do. I always was just like, I have no idea what I want to do. So I went to college and got the most basic degree, the most like open-ended degree, which was communications and marketing, like just allowed me to potentially do who knows what, still kind of like buying my time degree. And I took the first job that I got offered out of college, which was a sales role at ADP. And I was in Minneapolis at the time. And truly, like Sarah Blakely style, like door to door, like knocking on small businesses to sell them payroll, like a one employee, like trying to pay themselves through an S corp, all the way through to, a mid-sized company. And I ended up being oddly good at that, surprisingly. And so then got promoted to being a leader, was good at that, then got promoted to being a leader, but like kept climbing the ladder until I got to the point where I was tapped on the shoulder to transition from Minneapolis to San Francisco, to the Bay Area, to run that entire space out in the Bay, which was a huge leap and very exciting. And it was the year my husband and I got married. So it was kind of that like, ooh, this is a fun way to reinvent ourselves. And so we transitioned out to the Bay. This will come full circle. My very first interview that I had in the Bay Area was my now co-founder of BONDE. So very exciting, like kind of full circle moment. But ended up being the vice president out there for the region, and then was the vice president of private equity. That was all to say, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And every single role that I was in, I was still pushing boundaries. I was still frustrated with like the corporate culture, the corporate kind of like structure. I think ADP was a great company, a 75-year-old company that like did a really good job staying consistent in their decision making. I think that's probably why they're really like powerful in the way they are. But I struggled with it because I was like, ooh, what if we did this? What if we implemented this? Like all these different kind of like push the walls back type of ideas. And 99% of the time, it just wasn't well received. So I recognized early, but not often enough, that like I was not in the right room for what naturally drove me, which was risk taking, thinking differently, betting on ourselves. And so I actually channeled that energy less in processes and more in people. And I started leaning into, especially women that reported to me or were my peers, like, you should bet on yourself. You should think differently. You should lean into your power and your strength and your skill sets. And motivating them to see the good in them and the power that they have, and pushing against the grain in rooms with men that were saying, oh, he should get the position because he has great followership, or the promotion, he has great followership. And I'm like, well, she has great followership plus great results plus all these other statistic processes. And the guys were like, oh, you're right, she does. Okay, yeah, she should probably get the role. And so it just all kind of rolled into one where I started recognizing, one, I'm not in the right room in terms of processes and business, and I shouldn't be an employee. I felt that entrepreneurial spirit kind of like swelling over. Two, I'm in an industry, in a role that I didn't necessarily choose. It just chose me right out of college. And then three, there was this swell of like, but I love motivating, especially women, and pulling them into their potential. What do I do with this? Like, what do I do with this like tornado that was kind of happening internally for me at that time?
Oh, wow. Okay. So when you say interview, the first interview that you had with your now co-founder, did she work for ADP as well?
She did. Yes. At the time. Yes, she did. Yeah. So funny, I was tasked to take over that region, and really basically flip it. It was an underperforming region at the time, and I was tasked to go in and say, like, take out the people that weren't necessarily committed to the overall vision, hire new people that were. And I met my region that day wearing literally an ugly Christmas sweater because it was December 7th or something. And so it was like the holiday party. And we're in an ugly Christmas sweater like day, just like, of course, at corporate. That's the theme. And so I'm in this blue, I can still picture it. So can my co-founder, this like blue oversized reindeer snowman situation. And I meet my new team, and I'm terrified because I'm the new girl in class, right? And I'm their leader as well. And so I'm this new person that came from Minneapolis to California, the Bay Area, meeting all these people. They're looking at me like, who's this? Who's this gal from the Midwest in a ugly Christmas sweater? And so I get done with meeting them, kind of take that exhale moment of like, all right, well, that Band-Aid's done. Like, now we got to get to work. Immediately walk from one conference room into another room for my first ever interview, literally. And that is Parnian, my now co-founder of Bond. And she had just packed her car up to drive across the country from DC. And she was doing a very similar situation where she was trying to like get her footing in the Bay. And she was in that interview as well, just like, I just need to like get my footing and get a job and then kind of figure out my next steps from there. So here we are together, both like new to California, have that immediate oh, I can exhale. She's not judging me because I'm new. I'm not judging her because she's new. We're both new together today. And I looked at her and I said, here's the deal. I am here to reshape what this region is supposed to be. And I need people who are committed to where I'm taking this space. I need people who are committed to me and where I'm heading, like where we're going. Are you up for the challenge? Like, are you in or are you out? I was so dead honest with like the reality of what was about to happen. And she paused. I remember she paused, she looked down, and then she looked up and she goes, I'm in. And right then I was like, okay, you're hired, let's go. And from that day forward, as you can see now with Bond, like we've just been unapologetically like in each other's corner. And I think it's because like we bet on each other, quite literally, even an ugly Christmas sweater, like the moment we met each other. So that's kind of we had no idea 7 years later we would have an aha moment in December, by the way. Very similar time frame with Bond, but that's our meet cute, I guess.
You never know where your paths are going to cross.
Totally.
So can you walk us through that moment now where, that earliest seed of bond being planted between the two of you? Like, what exactly happened? Who had the idea? How did you start talking about it? Like,
Yeah.
what was that like?
Yeah. So I had left corporate, I think because of that swell, and I had finally gotten pregnant. And I remember very clearly holding my son. And I remember thinking and not seeing this coming, but the clarity was so clear that I was like, it's just that you hear it and you're like, I can't unhear it type of a thing. And I remember thinking, like, if I'm not with him, I better love what I'm doing. And it was just that clear. And I think that's when I recognized all those things I had just shared. Like, I didn't pick this. I was good at it. I'm so grateful for it. Like, I learned so much. I will never not be grateful for that 13, 14 years. But it just wasn't like what I wanted to do next. So we ended up leaving the Bay. And I think that was just the moment where I was like, this is my fork in the road. Like, I'm done. Like, it just doesn't feel right. I'm going to leave the company. I'm going to figure out what I want to do next. And so, like most people in transition, they're like, I'll do consulting. Like, I have this personal IP that people are willing to pay for. I'll just start doing consulting work, which is amazing. And so I started doing that, and I recognized really quickly that there was a gap in really how wide my network was. Like, I was so tunnel vision, like so many people are, on their company or their industry or their job function, that I never intentionally networked, externally networked, in like really like thought about my web of people that are around me and their influence in terms of insight, not influence necessarily in like what can they do for me, but just insight in general, like different companies, different roles, different lived experience. And I was like, gosh, I've been pretty like narrow, like pretty tunnel vision for 13 years. And I look up finally after leaving and I'm like, wow, I don't, nothing, it's kind of like, I don't have much out here. And so I very quickly, through starting my consulting business, recognized like I need to intentionally opt in to some sort of community, some sort of like a reach of a network. And so I landed on in the Bay, Chief was really big. And I always looked up to the women in Chief. You'd see them walking in the streets and they'd have like their Chief sweatshirt and you're like, she's a badass. Like, that's a cool person. She's a Chief member. And I remember being like, you know what? I'm betting on myself by starting this consulting business. Like, let me bet on myself and just apply to Chief. Like, let's see what happens. I apply, I get a response back, and I interview for Chief. And I remember meeting Emma, who's like still to this day a very good friend, like now a very good friend of mine. And she interviewed me, and I was like, she's the coolest. Like, just amazing. And I loved everything about her. And I was like, I want to hang out with her. Like, this is exactly what I mean. She had this different lived experience. She lived in New York. She had like all these different perspectives during the conversation. And I got off the call and I told my husband, I was like, I think I want to invest and I want to join this network. And I envisioned something so clearly, like what I thought it was. I envisioned like exactly what I pictured something so clearly. And when I joined Chief, it wasn't at all what I pictured, but I loved what it was. And so I was like, ooh, it's not what I pictured, but I do love what it is. And so I was like, oh, I'm so happy that Chief is what it is. It was a great resource for a long time. But I couldn't stop thinking about like what I pictured that I thought it was. And at that exact moment, Parnian, my co-founder, is proactively opening doors for me for my consulting business. Like, just being a bond member before we even thought of it. Like, opening doors for me, being an advocate, rooting me on, like so proud of me for betting on myself, like everything you want in a friend. And she called me one day in early December, just like when we met, and she said, "You got into Chief. How did you do it? Like, I'm in the same boat where I feel like I need this network of women." And I told her, I said, "You need to be at the time. I don't know what their rules are now, and I don't want to mislead, but I said, like, you need to be a people leader of X amount of humans for X amount of years, etc. And she's never been a people leader. She was always somebody that was in process or partnerships, and she had impact, but she was never like a leader of people or a certain like amount of team heads. And so I said, like, you'll never get in. And if you do start to lead people, like, you have this like time that you would need to in order to qualify, basically. And I remember very clearly the call was quiet, and she paused and she said, well, that sucks. Like, literally, that was her response. And I said, why? And she's like, I'm living in New York City. She had moved from SF to New York City during this time. And she's like, I need access to women who are in like-minded like time as me. And she starts painting this picture of what now is Bond. And what she was sharing was, I need authentic conversation. I want real connection. I want it to be personal and professional. I want it to be a resource, but I want it at my time. I want it to be able to be like nationwide reach for IP and like knowledge share, but I want it to feel local. So you have the ability to create like those lasting friendships that are like in your time of life and in your season for that relatability factor. And I told her, I was like, that is what I've been picturing. That was what I pictured and what I can't stop thinking about. And so in that moment, I swear to you, the call was 30 minutes. So this whole conversation is 30 minutes long. I literally paused and I looked at her, or not looked at her, on the phone. And I said, I think we should build it. I think this is missing. You are in New York. You need this. I'm looking for this still as well. I think we need to build this. And so we got off the phone. We said, let's think about it over the weekend. And on Monday, she texted me and she's like, I'm serious about this. Are you? I'm like, I'm dead serious about this. So since then, for a year and a half, we met every single day at 9 o'clock, super committed, fully working our jobs. But from 9 to 10, we committed 1 hour at minimum every single day to just dream up Bond. And we completely built it for ourselves. Like exactly what we felt like we wanted Bond to be is how we started it and built it for ourselves.
I love that story. That's such a great one. And it's so cool that you found somebody who is needing that exact same thing. You guys aligned so well.
Yeah.
So as a woman navigating, high level corporate spaces, what was something that you always noticed was missing? Not just like intellectually within the group, but experientially. So, the support systems that women leaders generally don't have, things like that.
I think that since building Bond, before Bond, I would have said mentors and like advocates and like just more women leaders, which is 1000% still true. Since building Bond and living through it, that is still true. So it's not like an either or, but I would say my answer has changed. And I think that it's authentic, truly authentic conversations. Like, you don't need more mentors to like tell you what you want to hear or even tell you what you should hear. Like, you don't need more thought leaders to tell you what you should do. So many people, mentors of mine, told me that I was somebody that didn't play the political game enough at corporate. Like, that is not what I don't need to hear that. Like, that is not who I am. That is literally, and like, that's fine for other people. Maybe that was the feedback that they wanted because they eventually did want to climb the ladder. That didn't land for me, even though that was coming from a mentor and somebody that even did care about me. But that's an example of like mentor versus, and even a bit authentic, but like confidential closed door rooms like what we've built at Bond, where you can actually say, I don't like it here. Like, I don't like working here. And like, I don't know what I want to do next, but I want to have a conversation confidentially with somebody else who's not a mentor that works at my company, because you can't tell that to somebody else that's above you as a mentor. So the feedback you're going to get from that person is you need to play the political game. Like, instead, you need a place that's like, here's what's actually going on in my life. Here's what's going on in my with motherhood that's impacting the way that I feel like I'm showing up at work. Or here's what's going on. I don't even want to be a mom, but I feel like I have this pressures of needing to be, and how that's impacting the way that I feel about my own self and all the different layers that come along with that. And that is what I feel like women, we're humans, men as well, like actually need, is this like room to be able to talk for real with an unbiased soundboard that actually says like, number one, I hear you, and two, I feel the same way, or this or that, and just helps provide clarity, not even necessarily advice, but just clarity. And that to me is like the real answer that I feel like I have after now living and breathing and seeing Bond in full force, compared to what I thought with corporate, which was mentorship and, corporate allies and some of those different pieces. I think they're all important, but just one is deeper rooted and I think more impactful than the other.
Yeah, there's a time and place for mentorship. I've even found that I need a break from it, to be honest, and I just need to like sit with myself, because internally I feel like you really do know what you want and what you need to do. And sometimes you just need somebody to kind of like mirror that back to you. But I absolutely agree. Like, what we truly deep down need is to be able to just like speak exactly what we are feeling and thinking internally without having any kind of agenda to talk about it, just like vocalizing it and having somebody understand where we're at and just like be there to listen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's where I think real problem solving starts, and real like, because there is such thing, and my co-founder and I talk about this a lot. I think I have some struggles sometimes with like talking about things so much without like action and doing things. And she keeps me grounded in that, where she's like, sometimes it's also okay just to like talk and sit and be. And I think that's why we balance each other out so well, and why we're really great at like two heads of bond sometimes, because I'm so like, but then like, how do we help her get where she wants to go? And like, how do we help her problem solve and tackle
Action.
things? Yeah. And Parnian is like, but also she needs to like hear herself think a minute and like ground in it a little before like she can actually take action. Otherwise we're just kind of like spinning and going. And so there's, I think, power in both. And so having the ability to hear that and to um, problem solve, and even if it's not to make a change, like not everybody needs to say, oh, not everybody has my story. That's like, I'm not happy in corporate, or even just not feeling like I'm in the right room at corporate and I want to pivot. Some people absolutely are like, I'm totally wanting to climb the ladder, but here are the things that I'm problem solving or troubleshooting as I'm doing that, with change management and needing to let people go. And how do I navigate that as an authentic leader and an empathetic leader? And how do I continue to not just make sure they know that I'm, human through that process, but also the team that's sticking around. How do I wrap my arms around them to make sure they feel comfortable in the transition and change, etc. So it's not just people pivoting by any means. That's what I think is so beautiful about this second and third layer of your career. It's just, you are navigating so much all at once, and just having that soundboard in an authentic and unfiltered and confidential way to be able to say, hey, here's what's going on, let's chat about it, I think is incredibly valuable.
Oh, absolutely. I would have loved to have that when I was in corporate. But I think it's also, as a founder, you need that as well. You need that type of environment, that space to be able to do the same thing.
Absolutely.
Um, there's vulnerability in asking for support when you're supposed to be the one with the answers. As a leader of community, you do have some kind of expectation for yourself. So how has your relationship with vulnerability transformed as you've built Bond?
I love it. I feel very free through it, to be honest. And I feel like you are so much more productive through it. An example is literally this conversation. We would not have it if I didn't feel vulnerable enough to post and say, a goal of mine is to be on 6 podcasts this year. Like, let me know if someone you know or you yourself are looking for a guest. Like, I know that almost doesn't feel vulnerable to some people, but putting yourself out there and sharing your goals publicly is vulnerable to a lot of people. And then even getting on a call like this, not knowing what question you're going to ask next on a recorded line is vulnerable in itself. But you start to recognize, like, the more you can lean into your authentic self and the more you can trust yourself in that, like, vulnerability doesn't feel so scary. It feels effective. And you start to see results through it. You start to find great friendships through it. You start to find the right people who are truly rooting for you through it. And you kind of also find the people that aren't really rooting for you through it, which is actually really okay too. And so it gives you a lot of, yeah, it feels really effective, honestly, as long as you feel like you're vulnerable for the right reasons and you're vulnerable from an authentic place and not from a place that feels like you're vulnerable, but from somebody else's lens, if that makes
Exactly.
sense.
I love that. I mean, I've learned with my communities, like, I'm not a know-it-all. Like, I'm not here to have
No,
all the answers to every question. Like, I have my expertise, but there's so much more to having a business that, I don't have the answers to, and that's okay, but I'm going to find them for you, right?
absolutely. And don't you find it almost like, I find it so exciting and addicting to be the connector of access. And 99% of the time, it's like, I don't actually know that answer. I'm not going to pretend to know, but I absolutely know somebody who might or does. And connecting the dots of that is like it gives me an actual like high. I cannot wait to be like, oh, you have to meet so and so. Like, as soon as the light bulb goes off, you're like, oh my goodness, you have to meet so and so because they will be able to blah, 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 whatever it might be. And so being able to be that connector instead of the know-it-all is like, it's
The
just the
best.
best. It's the
Yeah.
absolute best.
And then seeing those relationships flourish, on their own separately is just like, I love that feeling of being like, I love connected women.
Yes, and I think that's also why we strategically, after a long time really thinking through, because it's hard when Bond came about, because I didn't mean for it to, but like when I was joining Chief and act and envisioned one thing, and then when it wasn't that, which is totally, or it was and it wasn't, it was hard to almost unravel. Like, we're not trying to build Chief but different. We're trying to build something totally different. So it was almost challenging for my brain to unravel, like, what is the totally different? And so we got to a point where it's like, it needs to be founders and employees, and it needs to be people that are shifting between the two and feeling like their community doesn't have to change just because their title changes or because their state changes, because they're relocating. Like, it needs to be able to have that shared intellectual property that a founder has that an employee might need, and vice versa, and how they do belong together. At least they do in Bond. And I think there's a lot of um, effectiveness in communities where it's like, nope, this is only for marketing, or no, this is only for HR, or this is only for employees. Like, that is really effective in its own right, for sure. But we just feel like, for us, that's why we're like, this is what we want. So we're going to build it the way that what we want. And we wanted that shared melting pot of founder intel, employee intel, different industries, states, all the different things that just kind of creates that shared IP and the ability to make those connections regardless of, title or job function.
I love that. Now, let's talk about leadership and, bringing a little bit more humanity to it, because a lot of times leadership roles are, misconstrued a little bit. So many founders, or even leaders in the corporate space, they struggle. They have that tension between showing up as a leader, but also being a human still at the root of it. So what's one belief about leadership that you held early on in your career and have since had to let go of as you're stepping into more of a founder role, building out a community of, corporate and founders?
This might be controversial, but that's just, I guess, maybe I need to start embracing. I think leadership is human. Like, there's nothing more human than leadership. And I think it's so insane that, like, at some point, your question is right. Like, so many people in society has made us feel like, how do you bring human into leadership? And how do you make leadership more human? And it's like, that's literally your job, is like your people. Like, your people are quite literally your job. And like, sure, the numbers and the results and all that stuff are also your job. But I think that was why I never saw myself as like a sales leader or a revenue leader or a partnerships leader. I think at the beginning, I don't know if I even said I was a people leader. And even though I wasn't, I like technically was a sales leader. But the way that I was successful and why I kept getting promoted is because I kept hitting the number. Companies wouldn't promote you if you didn't do that. But it was because I cared about my people that the number just happened. Like, I can say this because I don't work there anymore. I very rarely ever knew my number. Like, truly, I never knew my comp plan. If I needed to articulate it, I got so nervous if anybody ever asked me, like, can you break down the comp plan? I'd be like, oh, I don't know. I don't know it. I didn't fully ever, like, I never really logged in to like check the number. Like, I didn't obsess over forecasting. I didn't do any of that because it didn't light me up. And I honestly just I didn't love it. I didn't love that part of my job. But I loved my team and I loved my people and I loved pouring into like, what are they good at? Like, what are they excited about? Like, I had somebody that she never wanted to be a leader. And I was like, oh my gosh, she is like she's a leader. Like, she is a perfect leader. She is like exactly who should be in the role. And I took my time inspiring her and pulling out in her like, this, you are a leader and here's why. And now to this day, she's been one of the best leaders ever. And like, by doing that, she started to recognize her worth, her value, and then she just kept kicking butt. And then the number just happened to go with it. And so it was never a strategy for me to be like, oh, I'm going to inspire my people and then the number will happen. It was never a thought. It was always just hiring really, really wonderful people like Parnian, setting great examples in the hiring process, like I did with Parnian, and making sure they know what they're signing up for, being really human from the get-go. I mean, I literally had to tell her in that interview, like, here's what's going on. I'm super nervous. I just met my entire region and everyone looked at me like, get out of here. Like, and they ended up being wonderful. So it's not a knock on them, but like, of course they're going to look at me like that on the first day. And that is how you lead, is through pouring into your people. And then whatever like the other reason you're a leader for, whether it's for partnerships or strategy or process or sales or whatever, that stuff all just happens if you just like lead human first and lead with your people.
I totally agree. A lot of people have a misconception between like leaders and managers, right?
Yes.
So it's really cool to talk a little bit more about it. And I'm sure we could go down a rabbit hole and really uncover a lot of stuff, but lots of questions here for you.
Yeah.
So let's chat about resilience. So how do you tend to your own resilience when your work centers around supporting other people's growth? So you're constantly kind of focused on supporting your community members and being there for them and guiding and, connecting and whatnot. But how do you tend to your own inner resilience?
I don't know. I don't think I'm great at this one right now in this moment. So I think it's a good question. And not that I'm bad at it. I think it's just I'm a mom of two, three in one, a wife, a daughter, a sister, like a friend, like all these different people in my life that I'm pouring into. And then you're also building something you're incredibly passionate about. And then you're incredibly passionate about all those people and all their goals. And so I think maybe the answer, I don't think I have an intentional process right now of like, here's my resilience process to answer the question. But I don't feel like I'm not being resilient right now. I'm totally answering this on the fly. I would say it's the people right now that are like keeping me motivated. Maybe that's the way that I would answer it. So I think less on the resilience factor and more on like what's motivating me to begin with, and motivating how I work, how I keep guardrails on my calendar, how I protect my time with my family versus my time with work. I think that's probably more so like my motivator is maybe like protecting the need for resilience, or maybe I need to consider more of a resilience plan since I don't have an answer to this. That's my answer.
That's good. I mean, that you are where you are in your journey, right?
Right.
I love
That's
that.
right.
We do wear a lot of hats as women. We are a mother, and well, I'm not, but you are a wife, which that takes up a lot of energy and time as well to be nurturing that relationship. Wife, daughter, sister. There's so many like things pulling at us on a daily basis, and just making sure that you're tending to your own needs as well can sometimes take a back burner, especially when you have a community of people that are also looking to you as a leader and
Totally.
somebody that they can get support from.
I
So,
would say too that actually you bring up a good point as I'm unraveling that a little bit more. Like, I think that's even why we built retreats in our programming for Bond. And because and as we thought about like, not so much ever, I don't think we ever asked like, what's our differentiator with Bond? Because we weren't building anything to be a differentiator for anyone. We were building something that we wanted, period. And still to this day, every single thing that Parnian and I do is like, do we want this? Like, do we like this? And then we just we implement it, and we're still very much listening to members and pulling that in, but we're building something like we're members of Bond. This isn't something that we built to say, I hope you like it, see ya. Like, we're fully members of Bond because we built it because we wanted it. And so one of the things that we implemented was retreats and the ability to truly clock out for yourself and clock into time. And we had a retreat in September that was in the Catskills, so upstate New York, and 30 Bond members joined. And I was technically hosting it, but I allowed myself to also be there present alongside the members as well, just to experience it alongside them. And I didn't realize how much I needed that time to myself, and not a trip, not an anniversary trip, not a trip with your family, not a trip for work, like just for yourself, just to like be alone in your own head, answer like thoughtful questions in community about yourself, and just hear yourself think for a little bit, was incredibly rewarding and fulfilling. And so I think you're so right, just like carving out those times like a retreat, to actually spend time with yourself and nourish yourself along the way with obviously a beautiful retreat, and with great community as well.
I love that we get to build something that we're looking for, and yeah, we're building it for other people, but we're also able to enjoy it ourselves because that's something that's been missing for us essentially.
Yes, absolutely. Otherwise, like, why are you building it?
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly.
What's something that you're afraid to say publicly about the future of women leadership? Maybe it's things that you've noticed in the world. Maybe it's truths that people feel internally, but few actually voice out loud.
More and more women are betting on themselves, like, and not in a obvious way, in like a betting on exactly what you just said. Like, what do I actually want based on my personal IP? Every single one of us, especially when we hit, call it 35 and beyond, you have this lived experience of 12, 13, 14 years of work, whatever that might look like, plus your life experience. Did you move? Were you the new girl in school a lot? Did you, whatever, doesn't matter. Like your college experience, all the things, that's yours. Like you've lived and owned that. And so many women now, and I love this, are like, what do I do with this? Like, now what do I do with my personal IP? And I think that our prior generation, one removed, is the first generation that was even like able to get a credit card on their own and able to be encouraged maybe to get a job or maybe to go to college. Like the generation before that was not encouraged to do that. Rare if they were. And we are now the generation, thankfully, that likely was not everyone, but in somewhat encouraged to do something with ourselves, which is just, I can't even believe I just am saying that out loud. But I think that we have a little bit more confidence in saying, I have this lived IP. Now, what do I want to do with it? How do I want to make it impactful? How do I want to make it meaningful? How do I want to balance it with my life? Whether you have children or not, doesn't matter. It's your life. And how do I want to create the life that I want based on my unique experience? Are there causes that I care about? Do I have a family member that something happened to that I care about? How do I pull this in? And through communicating and having conversations with so many bond members, it doesn't necessarily mean you're leaving corporate. I don't want to paint that picture at all, but I think we're in this really special window now where women are saying, I am going to bet on myself, meaning my personal IP, what I believe and have lived. And now I'm going to use community outlets, access to actually dream up, now what can I actually do with this? And I'm very excited to see where like the next 15, 20 years take women that are in our age range is 35 to about 50 to 52. Like, how do we take that and actually do something with it? Corporate or founder, doesn't matter, but like, how do you actually do something with it? So
it's interesting that, a lot of, because this is still relatively new for women, stepping out and betting on themselves. I feel like a lot of women still feel like they don't have something to bring to the table. That, they don't have that IP, even though they do have that lived experience, they don't see themselves that way. So making it more normal or like, available to them, I think is going to be really important too.
yeah, I think so. And having just a room to be able to like just talk about it, like talk about it out loud, like, and let other, it's so easy for other people to see what you're great at or to see what you are capable of or what your passions are. It is such a blocker. It is hard. I remember in the Bay, you're surrounded by startup founders. Like you're surrounded by so many people creating amazing companies. And I just remember being an employee, kind of being a rule breaker, risk taker, etc. And I remember looking around the room on some of those startups or, being at a coffee shop and hearing the way they're talking and thinking. And I was like, oh, like if they can do that, like, why can't I? And I just always felt that sense of like, but I never knew. I remember walking through Fort Mason and the Embarcadero and all these different walks that I would do in San Francisco. And I was like, but what is it? Like, what is my thing? And I would listen to how I built this when I'd get my nails done, which I'd need to do because my thumb's off, like all the things, like it's so hard to identify like what is it. Yes, I have this IP, but like what do, and that's what the question, why the question now, what do I do with it, is a huge question to take very seriously, because there is an answer at the end of the question, and it doesn't always mean that you're a founder of something, and it doesn't always mean that you're going to blow your life up. That's not it at all. But it's just taking that question very seriously without overwhelming yourself, but using that to be a fuel for like, what is this now? How do I use this into like my third chapter of my career to really make it worth it and
That's such a
impactful?
powerful question.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, what is the single practice, whether it's, on a daily basis or every week that you do? Maybe it's a ritual, something that you do for yourself that sustains you as now a founder of a community, and a leader, especially when, the external world sometimes feels a little heavy like it does currently.
Yeah. I, uh, this is an area for like the me time stuff is like the hardest questions you've been
Well,
throwing
you
at.
have two young ones.
It's a good takeaway for me. What I really try not to do any sort of like productive work after I put the boys down for bed. Like it doesn't help me sleep well. It's just kind of revs me up again. Um, I love what I do, so it doesn't feel like work. And I think that's why it's so easily justifiable. I'm sure you feel the same way a lot of times, but it's just not good for my, like, honestly, my sleep for the most part. My husband and I have recently been like following the like Shabbat processes of like actually lighting a candle on Friday night and putting your phone away and like not getting it until Saturday night or even Sunday. By recently, I mean like 2, 3 weeks ago. Like it's very recent, but I just think we went to the David movie, which is the David and Goliath movie with our son. And so that's what inspired it, because they were talking about like Shabbat and Shalom and all these things. And we were like, you know what? There's like some beauty in that practice. Like, let's actually do it. And by just in general, putting your phone away, lighting a candle, and just like being present with family and off technology. And that's been really wonderful. Like, just to be like on Friday night, I'm unplugging completely and I'm not picking up my phone until Sunday morning or Saturday night. So that's been really nice to do that as well. But
It's probably so good for your nervous system.
it is. And you notice how many times you like go to check it or go to see something. And especially, I think, obviously anybody, but with the littles too, it's just nice to not be like checking my phone for no reason, like right in front of them, and just being fully present with them too is really important for me. So, yeah.
Sometimes I was just on my phone, and then for some reason I have like a spare minute, and I'm like, why do I feel this intense need to like check my phone when I know nothing new has happened? Like I don't need to scroll. Like there's a problem here. Like
There is a absolute problem here. I know it's wild. It needs to be totally in another room in order for you to not feel like you just need to pick it up to do nothing with it. It's so wild. So highly recommend lighting a candle on a Friday and setting the mood and intentionally putting that phone away.
whether you
Recommend it
have that tradition or
after
not,
3 weeks or
still a
so.
good one. So
Exactly.
finally, what is the invitation that you want every listener tuning in today to take with them, maybe not as inspiration, but as action, which is something that you have at the core?
Yeah, I would say I love this question. I would say, obviously, if any of this resonated and you're feeling like you need or are looking for a community like this, take a look at us at joinbond.com. You can apply on the website. We accept roughly 30% of the people that we interview. So we're very thoughtful in our process. But absolutely take a look at it and apply. So that's one tactical piece. Of course, I'm going to plug that. But I would say exactly what we just talked about. Like, if you're at a place where you feel like, gosh, I am worth it, and am I in the right room, and or even in the right position, and kind of feeling that like voice, that I have all this value, because you do, and I have all this personal IP. It's yours. Only you have it. Your value. What do I do with it? Like, literally live in that question, whether you write it down, whether you use LLMs to like chat it out, like, your call. I'm happy if you even want to get a hold of me and like, let's chat. I love this dialogue. I think it's a really powerful question, and it's one that we can get a lot out of. So that would be my two prompts for everyone.
Amazing. Well, that's a wrap on today's conversation, and it was quite a beautiful one. So, Meg, thank you so much for, sharing so generously and, sharing the real moments, the quiet pivots that happened when you were building Bond and, truths that a lot of people just don't say out loud or are not comfortable doing so at that point. For those of you listening, I hope that this episode gave you permission to slow down, to trust what you are building, and to remember that doing it differently doesn't make you less ambitious. It just makes you more intentional. So if something in this episode resonated, I'd love to hear from you. I'm sure Meg would as well. So I'll leave all of her contact details in the show notes. And if you're in that in-between place that Meg spoke about so beautifully, know that you're not alone, and there is a community there to support you through it. So until next time, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jessica. I love the conversation.